Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Welcome back to Gun Freedom Radio. I am your host, Cheryl Todd, and I am excited to be here today with Alexander Lanshe. Alexander is the Warrior Millennial, and he is an author of 2 books, Warrior Attitude, 21 Ways to Think and Act Like a Warrior That Will Transform Your Outlook on Life, and The Anatomy of a Warrior, the 7 virtues all warriors must live by to successfully protect and serve. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Hello, Cheryl. Thank you so much for having me on. This is going to be great.
Absolutely. So I got to meet you in person. We've been Facebook friends for a bit, I think, but
Yes.
We got to meet in person this past weekend here in Phoenix, Arizona at the Well-Armed Women Conference. And I have to almost believe that they did this on purpose. They bookended. I spoke on Friday about ordinary warriors and
Right.
kind of the power of the polka dot that is my camo. And you spoke on Sunday about ordinary warriors and the anatomy of a warrior. And I'm so sad I didn't get to be there to hear yours, but I hear it was, I missed out.
Yeah, I've been very privileged to go 2 years in a row now to that conference. They Carrie Lightfoot and the Well-Armed Women treat me really well. And apparently I'm becoming a fan favorite there. So I hope I can go back next year and, really help them out. It's a great place to be.
Well, fantastic. And I will, I think you said you might have posted your video of your speech.
Not yet, but it will be going up soon. Yes.
Okay.
I might even do like a watch party, like a countdown, and kind of make it an event. So.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I will show up for that event. So, in trying to kind of boil down what of the gajillion things that you and I could be talking about, it's like, well, we only have so much time. So I really wanted to kind of touch on the idea of like the foundation piece, right? So what is the true foundation of freedom and self-protection in your way of thinking?
Right. So a little background on the book. The Anatomy of a Warrior is titled that because I really do believe that the virtues really is the anatomy, if you will. It's, anatomy in the physical sense would obviously be physical components, the bones, the muscle. But then you have the anatomy of the spirit, basically, the anatomy of the heart, what really makes a warrior. And so the book is based on 120 interviews that I did with people like Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, Gavin DeBecker, Masad Ayub, Carrie Lightfoot, Julie Golub, people that actually do it and have been doing it for a long time. And the question I asked them was all really simple. It was just, if you could basically clone or create the perfect warrior, what kind of virtue would we give them? If they were going to protect your family, what kind of virtues would we want them to have? And so virtue really is at the foundation because, as you and I know, it's not about the tools. The tools just carry out the will of the person. And so if the person doesn't have these foundational virtues, and in the book, the number one virtue they all mentioned is courage or fortitude. The other one would be charity or love, like the deep, self-sacrificing love, not the Disney version of love that we get, spread around. The really deep, self-sacrificing love that wills the good of the other. And then there's humility. There's justice, which is related to honesty and truth. They have to be people who know what reality is. And then prudence, which is discernment, making good judgment calls, in the moment, and the ability to plan. And then the last two were faith and temperance. Temperance is basically just self-control. And so that is the foundation. If we don't have people that are striving for those virtues in their daily life, then their guns are not going to be super effective because We know and see what happens when people who have no virtue or lack a lot of virtue get their hands on guns. And that's really the question, because everyone's asking that right now, right? That's the climate. How do we stop bad guys from getting guns? Well, you need them to not be bad guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's easier said than done, obviously.
It is. But don't we have an opportunity with each new life that's born and, each new day, really, to make a personal decision or to make a positive impact on those around us?
I totally agree. Yep. And if we're not walking that walk, then we're not really spreading that to other people. Talking about it's one thing and it's good. You need to talk about it. But people are also going to look at your example. And if you aren't an example, then they're going to think you're a hypocrite and they're not going to want to do it.
Absolutely. And I love the phrasing that you use because, that unfortunately, this true statement has become a cliche. And the true statement is, guns don't kill people, people kill people, right? It doesn't, the fact that it has kind of become a clanging gong doesn't take the truth away from it, but people won't hear it anymore. But I like how you phrased it, that tools carry out the will of the person. That's a new way of saying that for my ears anyway. And I like that.
Yeah, no, it is true, because once things become super cliche, you're right. We just kind of tune it out, and I don't know why we do that, but that does tend to happen. And so, yeah, you need to have new ways to say the same truth to get new people to maybe hear it. And this is just common sense, because sometimes things have to be said a different way to make sense to a certain person. Mm-hmm. It's the same exact truth, but it has to be worded differently for it to stick in their mind. For whatever reason, it's just the one way doesn't make any sense. But then if you reword it, then suddenly the same exact truth becomes clear and apparent.
Absolutely. And so that kind of takes me to the second thing I wanted to talk about. I've heard you say that there is a way. I don't know if it's a phrase. I don't know if it's a skill set, but there is a way to end the gun control debate, no matter who you're talking to.
This is true. That's a bold claim, right? So if you're listening, I'm sure you're kind of like, wow, you, sir, let's see about that. But I will endeavor to do that right now. So this is what I did for the well-armed women at the talk too. And this gets the biggest reaction of anything that I talk about, as far as like, oh my gosh, that makes total sense. So what's the problem with the gun debate? The problem with the gun debate is it's the wrong debate.
You're right.
Because we say like it's not about the guns, it's about the person. But then how do we argue? Argue about guns. It's gun control. It's pro-gun versus anti-gun. Excuse me. So that's the whole issue. Mm-hmm. So how do you defeat the argument is you don't debate on their terms. And I'll explain how to do that. So when people say, because I told this to the group too, I said when people frame it in the pro-gun, anti-gun, if you tell someone I'm pro-gun, to the other side, if there is another side, whatever the other side is, what they hear is I love my tool more than I love human lives. That's what they hear in their head. So you can argue, like once you've said that, you can then make any other point you want about the pie charts and the stats, because we know the stats back us up. All the defensive uses of firearms, you can quote all the stats, all like, well, the gun-free zones, look, it all happens in gun-free zones. You can quote all those statistics after that, but they will not hear any of it, because all they heard in the beginning was, I care more about keeping my possessions, my objects, more than I care about human lives. That's not technically what you said, but that is all they will hear. And so how you end the debate is you don't have the debate on their terms. So when they say, are you pro-gun, anti-gun, pro-Second Amendment, anti-Second Amendment, you say none to any of that. I am pro-self-protection.
You have a T-shirt that says that. Are you wearing it?
I don't know if you can see it. I'll have to adjust the camera here.
There it is. I am pro-self-protection. I was seeing pictures of that
It's purple for the well-armed women, but it stands out. I've had tons of them say when they wear it, it's a conversation starter. They've even gotten to recruit people into the well-armed women based on seeing this shirt because they struck up conversations with people. But that's how you have to talk about it, because that is really what it's about. The guns are only part of the discussion because they are one of the tools that allow us to protect ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If we have better tools, I'm pro whatever those tools are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about the tool.
I like that. So often I try very hard on this show to not, use the divisive language of like, well, it's the left versus the rights and those Democrats or those liberal, you know what I mean?
Right,
it's
because
like,
that's a trap.
Right. So I usually praise, the rights restrictors, which whether they've got a big D on their chest or whether they got a big R on their chest, they are trying to restrict my rights. And so then that argument actually could fall apart faster than what you're saying, because people are like, well, even rights have limits and, let's be reasonable and that sort of thing. And you're saying it's about pro self-protection. So at what point do you get to tell me
that I can't protect myself?
Right. That's
and especially for a culture that says they don't like to judge.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like to judge, but they like to judge how I get to protect myself or why I get to protect myself.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You hold them accountable. And see, one of my backgrounds is philosophy, so I love the, figuring out these arguments and basically pulling them apart and analyzing and reconstructing them. So you hold them accountable to what they already say.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't like judging, then you have to actually tell them that. Like, well, you seem to be judging how I get to protect myself.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that? I thought you were a compassionate person.
Mm-hmm.
You have to use that emotional language too, because they are projecting all their emotion. I care more about people than you do because you only care about your guns. So if you reframe it, you have to use those words because that's what triggers them. It's not the logic. Like, they don't care about the logic because, I mean, seriously, would you care about someone's logic if you thought they actually cared more about an object than people?
No, that's...
I wouldn't. I wouldn't care what their argument was. I wouldn't be persuaded by their logic if secretly behind all that, I thought their motive was, I just want to keep my stuff. I don't care if people die.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what I really thought they believed, I wouldn't care about their argument. So that is where a lot of them really are at, especially my generation, the millennials and Generation Z. They are inundated with the brainwashing. Brainwashing is too scary. Propaganda, whatever you want to call it. That's what they hear all the time. So you have to reframe it in emotional terms. Like, I thought you were compassionate. Don't you want people to not die? Of course I don't. Well, do you want them to get murdered? Do you want women who are in college dorms to get raped by people? No. Well, then why won't you let them protect themselves? You have to make them talk about that, because if you talk about the gun, the debate's over. You already lost in the beginning, and it doesn't matter what you say after that.
That's really well said, well phrased. And I think that is part of why the pro self-protection, pro rights, pro gun side keeps failing to be able to play on that playing field of sound bites, because we're constantly in explainer mode. We're constantly trying to go, yeah, but the founding was the squirrel.
No.
What? I don't know what you're even talking. Or there are old slave owners. Who cares about that? And we keep. But the other side, they just throw an emotional soundbite out there, hits people in the heart, blocks off their brain and their ability to think rationally, logically, and I think that you're doing a really important thing. And I've been thinking lately that we need more philosophers, because it does make
that is a brilliant insight.
Yeah, you just have to be able to wrestle with what is. You don't get to just pull stuff out of thin air, right?
Well, and if I may, you have to realize that the enemy, whoever the enemy is, the people who are anti-self-protection, which is what you have to start calling them, they're not anti-gun, they're anti-self-protection. They don't want you to be able to protect yourself from them or from the people that they proxy out their violence to, which is almost always what it is. They're not going to do it, but they're going to call someone else to do it, which is, that's what we all would do, right? If you have the choice, I don't want to have to be the one that does the violence. I'll call someone else and make them do the violence. But so they want you to not be able to resist whatever that looks like. And that's if they've even thought this through, though. See, the reason this is so powerful is because most people who are anti-gun, they haven't thought it through like this. They're just repeating what they've been told. So if you reframe it this way, then they'll start seeing, well, I'm not anti-self-protection. I do want people to be able to protect themselves. And that will get them thinking on the right line. Now, you might encounter someone who's like, I don't care. You shouldn't be able to protect yourself at all. Then now you're dealing with someone with malice. That's a totally different person. If they knowingly are okay with disarming and they know the full ramifications and it doesn't bother them because it's not going to affect them, Bloomberg, then they don't care. They're a totally different bird. But the normal person that you and I are going to interact with, that the listener is going to have a talk with, like their mom, their dad, their siblings, their spouse, most of those people are not really in their heart anti-self-protection. They'll never say that. You're like, so you're pro women getting raped and murdered in their college dorms? They're like, no, of course not. It's like, well, right. So then why won't you let them protect themselves? See, then it can shift into the facts. Once you get past that gun thing, then it can be, well, because then the question is, how do they protect themselves? Well, they don't need a gun. It's like, well, maybe you don't need a gun for everything, but if you're a 5 foot tall, 100-pound girl in a college dorm and a 6'2" rapist comes in who's 200 pounds, do you want to have to fight them with your bare hands? See, then you can start having that conversation. But if you start with I'm pro-gun, then that all they hear is the tool.
Yeah. No, that's really smart. And so the other question that I wanted to ask you is, about the whole ordinary warrior. First of all, what would you say that is? And you seem to think that there's a secret power, I do as well, behind that idea of the ordinary warrior.
Well, I think there is, because whoever you want to call it, the media, however you get all these silly ideas from, a lot of these people, we're told from an early age you can't do anything important unless it's big and extraordinary. And you have to go change the world and all that kind of stuff. Well, the problem is then people start thinking about things that they can't ever possibly do. They imagine things like inventing a brand new technology that like reshapes the whole landscape. On an actual percentage scale, that's 0 people who do that. So if you make that the goal, it's like, and I get it, because everyone's like, well, if you aim high and then you don't hit the goal, then at least you get somewhere higher. It's like, no, but there is such a thing as aiming so high and then failing so miserably that then you don't strive anymore. That's the problem. So the ordinary warrior, the language, and you talked about this with the well-armed woman, that's why I wanted to talk about it with you, is because you have to reassert the power into the ordinary. Because that is, ironically, and other philosophers have talked about this, it is more extraordinary to be ordinary because nobody wants to do it. It's not glamorous. I told the ladies this, the well-armed woman too, is that it's easy to get an ego when you're a speaker because you're the one speaking. Everybody's looking at you. You forget that it's you serving them and you're still just an ordinary person. But everyone has to do that in their daily life. So it's like, just like doing the dishes when you don't want to is an act of courage.
Yeah.
It's those little acts that build up your character, which is what makes you the warrior or not. It's not about whether or not you own a gun. It's, do you have all those virtues we talked about, the courage, the love, the fortitude, the humility? That's what makes you a warrior. That's the true anatomy of the warrior. So how do you get that? Well, you don't get that by trying to launch like the next Apple company, because no one's going to do that. You get it by doing all the little ordinary things that you don't want to do. For firearms people, it's like you make the time to go shoot, even when you don't want to. Well, why? Because you don't know when you're going to need it necessarily. So you need to make the time. And are you disciplined enough? Do you have the courage to go train when you don't, to teach the student that you don't really want to teach, but they already paid for the class? Are you patient enough to get through it? That's what makes the warrior. And so the power, the secret is don't care about the extraordinary stuff that the media and other people try to sell you on. It's not important. And the other last part about the ordinary is don't fall for any of the despair tactics. And a lot of these anchors and hosts do, like they sell all the fear. The media, that's all they sell. They sell you a bunch of fear. Notice they never give you solutions. Violence is always random, senseless, purposeless. Why? Because then you're not responsible for stopping it.
Mm-hmm.
How can you stop it if it's truly, if it's like rolling dice or just like drawing a card out of a deck of cards? How can you possibly stop that? You can't. The lie is violence isn't like that. It is predictable. You can stop it. You can prevent most of it,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to know that.
Mm-hmm.
So don't listen to any of the fear mongering. Be ordinary and control what you can control.
Absolutely. So, as I was listening to you talk about that, I pictured in my mind, it's some little story, probably someone made up. I don't know if it was ever something that actually happened, but I think it's like a grandpa and his grandchild are walking on the beach, and there's a gajillion starfish or sand dollars, depends on who wrote the story,
Right.
both versions. And the grandpa picks one up and throws it out, picks one up, throws it out to sea. And then the grandchild says, "What are you doing?" And the grandpa said, "Well, I'm saving these starfish." And the little one says, "Well, there's no way. We'll be here for a year trying to put all these back in the water." And then the grandpa says, "Okay, that's true, but I can make a difference to that one." And he picks up another one and that one. And so that's that tiny acts can sometimes be huge, right? It's the whole world to that one starfish.
Right. Yeah, it's life or death for that starfish.
Absolutely. And the other thing I was thinking about is when they say, well, you can't predict, so you can't do anything about it. Well, the same people that might want us to swallow that down wholesale are the same ones that when they get in their car, they put their seatbelt on. Why? Because they plan to go out and get in a car wreck? No.
Right. No, yeah, exactly. It's the same argument. Why'd your seatbelt on? Are you planning to crash?
Right.
No. Why do you own a fire extinguisher in your house? Are you planning to burn your house down? No. Why do you need a fire extinguisher? We have a fire department. Dummy. Don't you know you can just call the fire department? Like, why does that somehow make no sense? Like, everyone, like, you laugh. Everyone will laugh and go, "Oh, it's clearly stupid." And we're like, well, so why do you have a gun? Why do you have any tool to protect yourself? Are you planning on getting attacked? No. So why do you have it? Don't you know you can just call the cops? But then for some people, that makes sense. They're like, "Oh, yeah, I'll just call the police." And I'm like, you just want to call the fire department if your house is burning? You don't want a fire extinguisher in the house? Well, yeah, I got to have a fire extinguisher. Okay. The gun is just a tool.
Exactly.
The fire extinguisher is a tool. They're all literally man-made implements to get a certain job or task done.
Exactly. And we're planning for the
worst case scenario.
Exactly. Thank you.
I don't want to do it, but it would be real nice if I could put my little stove fire out with a fire extinguisher before I let it grow to my house and then have to call the fire department.
Exactly. That's fantastic. So I just want to brag on you a little bit. First of all, you graduated magna cum laude.
Thank you.
Kind of a big deal. That's dedication. That's congratulations. That's fantastic. In Akron with degrees in exercise science and philosophy. There's that philosophy piece again. And you are one of 7. You're the oldest of 7 children?
I am, in fact, the oldest of 7.
So did you kind of become, daddy to a lot of them, like helping out around the house in those kinds of ways, that sense of...
Yeah, I raised all my the first few siblings after me were so close in age, you don't really raise them. But the last 3 or 4 of the siblings, I'm second dad. My parents are great. So it's not like I was like filling in for my dad or anything.
No. I didn't mean to imply that. I apologize.
Just in case anybody's getting confused.
Right.
No, that's how you do it. And it was fantastic. I want a big family myself one day. There's no other way to go, in my opinion.
That's awesome. And so I'm thinking, with that big of a family, and then you've got some that are closer in age and some that, So probably that philosophy and learning how to argue well maybe came into play.
Well, when they're little, they can't beat me because I'm the oldest. So
That's true.
if I'm losing the debate, I can just grab them by the scruff and.
There you go. I love it.
But as they get older, then you got to get more intellectually sophisticated to beat them. So no, people don't usually like arguing with me.
No, that's fantastic. I really do think that philosophy is something, it's not a degree that you're going to make a lot of money with, but I think that it's a mindset and a way of examining the world that it's slipping away from us a little bit. And I think that we need to figure out ways to bring that back into mainstream discussions.
No, you're the first person I've ever heard bring this up, and it makes me really happy because one of the famous sayings is, if your warriors don't think and your thinkers don't fight, then you're going to have, all the fighting is going to be done by idiots and all the thinking is going to be done by cowards.
Wow. That's a little terrifying because
right.
We're kind of there in a lot of ways.
It's like, because you don't just want the warriors to be brutes because then they can be controlled by anybody. You have to have the virtues so that they're not able to just be controlled like robots. And then you don't want all your thinkers and intellectuals to be people that just sit at desks and don't do anything because then they don't have any skin in the game. See, all of our old leaders, even in America, like Washington, all those guys, they all actually fought. Like they all actually had to lead the men in the military. They didn't just get to sit in the White House and twiddle their thumbs and go to war and have no skin in the game. They had to fight. All the old leaders, all the old kings and the monarchs and the generals like Leonidas and Sparta, they all were on the front lines with the troops. So do you think they'll make different decisions based on that instead of being in the ivory tower going, well, we'll send these people here and these people there and who cares if they die? Like, right, because you're insulated in the tower.
Yeah.
You're still, sucking down all the fancy drinks and eating all the fancy food while the troops are dying.
Well, and that whole, I'm kind of removed from any actual consequence.
Right.
That's the word. Look at social media, right? The vitriol and the anger and the
because they can't get punched in the mouth.
Exactly, and they don't have to actually. This is another thing that's funny that you've probably seen on a TV show or something where somebody's just being a horrible person in traffic. They're honking and they're throwing hand signs and all that kind of stuff and fighting somebody for a parking spot, and then the next thing you know they're actually face to face with that person in like a job interview or standing in line at the grocery store or
like in a typical Hollywood fashion,
Yeah, no doubt. And so it's like, if we would just think that way as we are being keyboard warriors, which are not ordinary warriors.
No, they've hijacked that word and they don't deserve the name.
No doubt. They're sitting there just spewing the most awful hate. And it's like, if you just pictured that person sitting across the table from you and you pictured your children or your grandchildren or somebody you respect, looking in on that conversation, would you still behave that same way? You just wouldn't. No. And the other thing about the philosophy, and then we'll start wrapping up a little bit, but the therefores, it's what I call them, that I see people come up with. So they're chugging along with their train of thought, and a lot of times I'm like, oh yeah. And then all of a sudden they go, so therefore, and then it's like
insert something that makes no sense.
Right. I'm like, what just happened? What? And how do we fix that? Like, how do people, the whole gun debate, we need more laws and stuff. That's one of those. So a guy walks in where he's the only person with a firearm. He commits horrible murders, and there was no immediate responder there.
Right.
Because they're in a gun-free zone. And so therefore, how do we fix this? Therefore, let's make more situations where fewer people are able to fight back. That is so hard for me.
There's only, for the people who make the laws, there's only two explanations. They either are actually truly that ignorant, which means they really have no business leading, because you can't be that ignorant and be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Or you maliciously sign that stuff in, knowing it doesn't help. Unless there's a third option that you can see, that I can't see. But you either are just literally either too stupid. I don't believe any of them are stupid. It's like, so like not literally what the actual definition of stupid is. They're not mentally incompetent. They can think.
Mm-hmm.
So they either are just truly ignorant of the truth of what a gun-free zone is.
Mm-hmm.
Which, what is a gun-free zone? It's an anti-self-protection zone. It's not a gun-free zone. It's an anti-self-protection zone. And so they either just don't know, which is negligent, in my opinion, since your job is to protect the citizens.
Yes.
That's your only job. So you're either negligent or you're malicious. And both of those are bad.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it's like in being in the gun world, the pro self-protection world, you hear it all the time. People talk about stuff about guns and they have no idea what they're talking about. You can tell in 2 seconds they have, for sure, never held one, never shot one, don't know anything about it, and yet they feel qualified to run their mouth about how to do it and what people should have it. And I'm like, you guys don't even know what you're talking about, though. It's like, if this was school and I showed up that unprepared for like a presentation in class and I was getting graded, I would get an F in the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a test because these people understand academia, if it was a test in public schools or college and I studied that little for the exam, I'm going to fail the exam.
Mm-hmm.
But then they get mad. And it's like, if you got mad, like, wow, I shouldn't have failed. And the teacher's like, well, did you study at all? No. And they're like, well, then that's why you failed. But then you still get mad. You're like, no, it's unfair that I failed. And you're like, thought we just went over the fact that you didn't prepare at all. How is this the teacher's fault? It's your fault. You didn't prepare. You don't have the virtue. You didn't study. You didn't prepare. So you can't even come to the debate.
Exactly. And so I always think in terms of like a doctor trying to diagnose something, right? So you walk in and you're having a headache and they think that the best thing to do is to do something that makes your head hurt worse. You know, it's like,
right, like chop off your head.
Right. Like
that'll cure your headache.
It's true.
Right. But then you're like,
exactly.
Wait, but won't I be dead, doctor? Well, I mean, details.
Right.
Minor details. Your headache will be gone.
But I solved the pain that was in your head. So
yep.
No, it's so true. It's like, you know, years ago, there was the big cure for everything was bloodletting, right? So they would attach leeches to you and actually, you know, cut you open and have blood come out. And we can look back at that now and go, what were they thinking that caused the death of so many people that wouldn't have died if they hadn't? I'm confident that at some future time, people are going to look back at this time in history and go, so there therefore was more gun laws, like less ability to protect yourself, like what?
And see, lots of us already see that, like all your listeners already see that. That's why they're listening to the show. They already know this. And so the other thing I want to say too is that the media wants you to think that you are way more alone than you really are.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
You're not. There again, we both just went to the Warrior Women Conference. There's hundreds of women there from all over the country. Those are just the state leaders, like the leaders of chapters and stuff. Those aren't all the members. There's 360 chapters of that organization across the whole country. There's 22 chapters just in California. Sacramento has over 100 members in that chapter. So there's tons of people who agree that with the absolute bare bones common sense, I should be able to protect myself. I have the duty and the obligation to protect myself. John Correa, do you know John Correa from Active Self-Protection?
Yeah, he's awesome.
He spoke on Sunday before me, and he's like, so out of all the videos, his talk was on like lessons learned from watching 17,000 self-defense encounters, because he gets all those real videos from security footage and dash cams and police body cams. He said, guess what the average amount of time that a self-defense encounter lasts in all the stuff we've researched? 5 seconds.
Whoa.
5 seconds for the initial contact, and then the person's either subdued or kind of done. 5 seconds is the average.
Oh, wow.
The average police response time in Phoenix is 11 and a half minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know about you, but that math doesn't bode good for you.
Right.
You know, and again, we all know this subconsciously. It's like, yeah, you can't, even if you get on the phone as it's happening, they're not, even if they're lightning fast, they're not going to be there in 5 seconds.
Right. No, we need immediate response.
Right, exactly. I like that you use that phrase. We need people that can do it right now. And if it's not going to be you, you better have people around you who can do it.
Absolutely. Wow. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. As we go out, I want you to tell folks about both of your books, kind of tell us what each one's about, how we can find them, and then also how we can follow and find you.
Right. So the main website is alexlanshe.com, ALEXLANSHE.com. Facebook, search Anatomy of a Warrior. Instagram, search Warrior Millennial. And so again, the Anatomy of a Warrior book was just born out of a process of really trying to drill into what does it really mean to be the warrior? Because everybody talks about it, but what do you actually have to do? Because see, virtue is a verb. You have to do it. That's why it doesn't always get the best reactions, because you can't just take a course online that makes you the warrior. The ordinary warrior has to actually get up every day and do the work. But what is the work? The work is not the extraordinary acts of like stopping the wars. It's like you don't have any power over that. You have to do what you can control in your own life. You got to fight your own demons, kill your own vice, because what's the opposite of virtue? Vice. So defeat your own demons and vices, and that's how you become the warrior. That's what makes you strong. That's how you're able to protect people and see what reality is. Because number one thing for the warrior is if you can't see the threat, you can't protect against it. You can't prevent it, and you can't stop it from happening if you don't even know what the threat is or that there even is a threat. So if you're too lost in vice and your own self-absorption, you won't see at all if there's a threat. And in the modern world, that looks like putting your head in your cell phone and just walking along without looking. You literally can't see what the threat is at all because your focus is too small, it's too narrow, and you're too self-absorbed in the phone. Like literally, it's not even in a judgmental way. You're just literally self-absorbed in the phone. So you lose all the peripheral, all that stuff, and then you're easy to victimize. So the Anatomy of the Warrior for the virtues, the book was trying to get into that. What virtues do you actually have to try to practice every day that will make you a better protector? So it's very practical. You can find that on Amazon as well. Search Anatomy of a Warrior. And then Warrior Attitude is a much smaller book. That is just really short chapters on just little mental attitudes you can remind yourself of to kind of stay in the right frame of mind. Some are little stories, some are just, little blog posts that I did and put them into book chapters. So that was really easy to read. I think it's just barely over 100 pages. Just really short mental reminders of things that warriors would use to stay fresh.
Fantastic. Can you hold up, do you have them both there with you or just the one?
Just the one.
That's great, because that is a human heart in the middle.
Yeah, human heart inside a arrowhead or a shield. If you don't protect that, you can't protect anything else.
Absolutely. Anatomy of a Warrior. And how do folks find those?
Amazon.com or alexlanshe, LANSHE.com.
Fantastic. And you're on all the social medias, Twitter included?
I am not on Twitter.
Good for you.
Not on Twitter. I never could figure out what Twitter was for, honestly. So I never got into it. I'm getting back into Instagram. I haven't been on Instagram in a while. So when you find Warrior Millennial, there's not too many posts yet. I just posted one from the conference. I'm going to start posting more on that one. But I've been on Facebook as Anatomy of a Warrior for a little bit longer. There's a lot more there. And I'm going to be rolling out a lot more content here in the upcoming months and years. I'm diving back into it. So
fantastic. Well, thank you again so much for your time, Alexander Lanshe.
Thank you, Cheryl. It was fun.
All right. Well, stick around. There's always lots more coming up on Gun Freedom Radio.